They sat me at the end of the table, close enough to hear the dishwasher hum and the silverware clatter. I kept my hands folded tight in my lap, while someone laughed and said, "Well, at least she's here now scrubbing floors instead of files." Fork hits plate, scraping out that silence everyone pretended wasn't there. I watched the cracked wine glass catch candlelight like a wound. No one asked where I'd been. No one mentioned the days I held the line so they could toast each other tonight. I chewed the silence until it cut my throat. Then the door swung wide. Boots thumped against old wood. He stopped short, eyes widening in disbelief before squaring up and saying it clear enough to freeze the room. "Ma'am, General, before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story moves something in you, consider subscribing." The light blurred everything in gold, too soft to be honest, washing over faces until they looked like wax statues left too close to the flame. My chair was near the kitchen door, close enough to feel cold, slipping every time it opened for another tray. Each swing sent the tablecloth brushing my arm, like it was trying to remind me I still had skin. Voices drifted and fell. Glasses clinked somewhere farther down the table, their clear notes sharp against the hush that swallowed me. A laugh cut the air in half, but never reached me. I watched the walls where old photos hung in crooked rows, their glass reflecting the low light in quick, nervous flashes. My name surfaced once, low and polite. The question that followed thin and breakable. "Settling in okay," said with a smile, already turning away. My mother's scent was the same, something powdery and old, clinging to her as she adjusted a napkin without looking at me. A cousin gave my hand a squeeze so fast, it felt like checking for a pulse. The words that met me were pressed flat, wrapped in silk, careful not to crease. Across from me, Jenna sat lit like a portrait, the lamp turning half her face warm, the other lost to shadow. Applause broke for her, people lifting glasses, calling her sharp, capable, exactly what this family needed. I raised mine halfway, let it hover without touching my lips. I caught a breath to speak, but someone else's praise knocked it back down my throat. I closed my mouth, let the silence fill it. My fingers wrapped tight around the stem of my glass, thumb running the faint crack that caught and held the light like a secret it refused to share. A fork dropped down the table, metal skidding against tile, scraping the hush raw. I watched someone bend for it, hair falling in their face, a small laugh trailing after, the sound softening into something I wasn't meant to hear. They shifted the chairs so mine pressed close to the window, cold, leaking through the glass against my arm. I could see the wall of framed photos under the dim lamp, each one crammed with faces angled to catch the best light. But there was a gap along the bottom row, empty, the hook still in the wall. The laughter around the table felt far away, bouncing off glassware and landing dull. A spoon stirring too long against porcelain, the clink uneven. Someone asked, "Is that spot okay for Elise?" Then didn't wait for me to answer. A platter I used to bring was replaced with something store-bought, foil creased, neat over disposable trays, the label still half stuck on the edge. When they lifted the cover, no one looked at me. I watched the steam rise and fade. The candles trembled at the other end of the table, lighting Jenna's face in flickers while mine stayed in the dark. My mother leaned forward to adjust the serving spoon without glancing up, her perfume stale in the heat, clinging in the air a moment too long before it died. They remembered to say, "Elise," once, low and careful, like testing if it was still the right name, then forgot it again. An uncle told the story of that one big event years back, but credited Jenna, said she always came through in a pinch. Someone else nodded, added she was a reliable one. I didn't move. I let the words pass. A cousin tried to catch my eye, then turned to refill her drink before I could speak. The candle closest to me guttered low, the flame weak, pooling wax in an uneven circle that bled toward the table runner. I tried to add something, felt my mouth open, but another voice cut over, pulling the conversation away like a door shutting. No one noticed. My fingers tightened around the glass, pressing the stem until it bit at the base of my thumb. I didn't drink. I watched the condensation slide, pooling under my palm, wiped it once with my napkin, even though no one was looking. The air pressed heavy against my chest. Far down the table, someone laughed. Not loud, but enough to make the shadows on the wall shift. My chair creaked as I adjusted, trying to find a spot that didn't scrape the floor. They shifted the chairs so Jenna stood at the center, the overhead light catching her hair just so, the shine landing like a spotlight. Someone cleared their throat, called out, "Jenna," once, twice, making sure it carried. She smiled small, both hands folded in front of her, voice quiet but clear enough to hush the scrape of silverware. The flame of the candle nearest me guttered, leaning her way, shadows gathering behind her like they knew who to follow. My own chair faced half away, pressing into the sideboard, so I sat twisted, shoulder close to the cool wall. They started clapping before she finished speaking. My father was the first, palms firm, repeating her name so it wouldn't slip. "Jenna really pulled this off," he said, voice warm, eyes bright with approval. My mother echoed it, twice, pressing a napkin to her lips before adding, "That's our Jenna," drawing out the sound like a comfort. The whole table turned in one slow wave, bodies angling toward her, eyes glinting under the soft light, leaving the space beside me dim. When someone said my name, it was like a question. Slow, careful. "Elise?" Trailing off before they made sure I heard. They laughed when she described the menu like she'd invented the recipe, even as the dish sat steaming in the same old pan I'd once carried in from the car. The table vibrated with agreement. Someone tapped a glass with a spoon too hard, the note shrill and off, then smoothed over by clapping. I watched my fingers grip the stem of the wine glass, thumb pressed white at the base, glass hovering inches from my mouth without touching. My throat felt scraped, raw, though I hadn't spoken. I drew a breath, words pushing up against my teeth, then closed them and let it dissolve. I caught my reflection in the cabinet glass, doubled and warped by the bevel. Jenna's outline was whole and bright, my own slivered in the background, broken where the door seam cut it in two. She turned slightly so her profile caught the light full, voice easing into another thank you. And they all leaned closer as though afraid to miss it. I adjusted my napkin with slow fingers, pressing out a crease that no one would see. The clapping faded in waves, softer toward the edges, falling into a hush that felt deliberate. The candle beside me burned low, its wick bending, throwing my shadow thin against the table leg. Long but easy to step over. I turned a little in my chair, shoulder pressing closer to the table's edge, glass in hand, tilting just so the candlelight caught it. My fingers traced the rim, while I drew a slow breath, words rising unsure in my throat. I looked for someone's eyes to hold, anyone's. Felt my lips part just enough to test the sound. I remember one time, I heard it start, voice low, careful, like I was afraid of making it too real too fast. The stem of the glass shifted under my grip, the liquid inside shivering. I leaned in, hoping the small lean would invite someone else to lean back. But laughter hit hard before I could find the next word. A cousin barked a laugh that cracked against the flatware. Glasses collided too hard in toast. "Jenna! To Jenna!" they called out, twice, stretching her name with a grin of relief at having a moment to cheer. The bright swing of the overhead light fell on her, turned her hair into something rich and burnished. The shadows around me felt like a door easing shut. My voice faltered mid-breath, catching on nothing. I let the next words fall silent, unspoken, dissolving before they formed. My eyes moved from face to face, waiting for someone to glance back. They were all turned her way, mouths half open in shared laughter, one hand over another's arm in easy camaraderie. I felt the weight of my own hand drop to the table, palm flat against the linen, fingers brushing the fold of a napkin. No one noticed me adjust. My other hand set the glass down too softly for it to clink, thumb leaving a smear along the curb. I tried once more to draw in enough air to try again. but my mouth pressed shut instead. My shoulders shifted back, pulling me away from the warmth they made together. Breath left me slow, leaking out past closed teeth. The candle to my left leaned and guttered, its small pool of light drawing away from my face until I could feel the cool dim press against my cheek. I watched Jenna's outline on the wall, neat and firm in its cast, while mine slipped behind the backs of chairs, cut by the high edge of the table. My fingers smoothed the last wrinkle from the napkin, one stroke too careful, then stopped. I noticed the water ring on the wood beside me, left by someone else's glass, and used the edge of my finger to break it apart before pulling my hand back. They turned the light a little so it fell warmer on Jenna, her name slipping out of mouths twice, 3 times, the syllables easy on their tongues. Glasses lifted at her cue, the gentle clink rehearsed, laughter breaking in soft chords, smoothing out the seams of conversation. I watched the candle on my side flicker low, the wax pooling uneven, catching a dull shine on the table edge. The air felt slow between each word, each grin leaning toward her, while I pressed my palm to the linen and felt the chill come up from underneath. I looked at her face, but couldn't tell what I was seeing exactly. Something bright, open, made for the room to look at. I let my eyes wander the rim of my glass, turning it just enough so the liquid edged up the side and slid back. There was a sound in the back of my head like I was remembering how it used to, but then the shape of it went soft. I think I might have known that laugh once. Might have. But it didn't land. I waited to hear it again, just to be sure. My fingers worked at the napkin on my lap, pressing out creases no one could see, folding it the wrong way, and smoothing it back. I tried lifting the glass partway, touched the rim to my lower lip, then set it down before it gave me anything. My shoulders pulled in as someone else spoke, the sound of her name bouncing easy across plates and silverware. "Jenna," they said again, like it belonged in their mouths. I shifted just enough that my knee knocked the table leg, not hard, but enough to remind me I was there. There was a blur in the cabinet glass behind her. My shape spread wide and faint, behind the sharper lines of her seated forward, the bright hem of her sleeve catching the light. I watched her lean in to speak again, the words falling close between them, the hush they offered her unbroken. My own breath dragged out of me slow, left my shoulders lower than I meant. I felt the chill off the floor through my shoes, let my heels slide back until I sat smaller, further. My eyes dropped to the shine on the table, followed the edge of a water ring that wasn't mine, one finger tracing it just until the swirl went out of shape. The room stayed warm in color, all that yellow light spreading across shoulders. The shining glasses lifted mid-sentence. Laughter caught in soft throats before spilling over. No one looking my way. Just the slow movement of hands breaking bread. The sound of a fork tapped twice to hush a joke. Then more laughter that landed like the hum of something mechanical, even practiced, bright enough to forget the walls were closed. My eyes drifted along the table, watching the reflections sway in half-empty wine, the little crescents of flame dancing on their surfaces. My own glass still full, still catching the glow, but giving nothing back, the rim damp against my palm, where I'd lifted it and never drank. I eased the napkin from my lap, folded it once with my fingers pressed flat, edges squared like I was waiting for someone to notice how careful I could be. The cloth held my shape for a second, then relaxed limp when I set it down. I shifted, heel scraping slow against the floor, hand closing around the back of my chair where the wood turned cold under my fingers. Felt it push back when I stood, the weight of it resisting before I slid it just enough to leave a narrow gap. My other hand reached for my coat, heavy where it pulled across my arm, lining brushed with static against my skin, the sound small and dry. No one lifted their head, the conversation swelling again to cover the noise of the chair legs. The hush of fabric pulled from the seat. I straightened, took one breath, let it go through my teeth in a hush. Glanced at the doorway like checking for something that wasn't there, fingers flexing once against the folded coat before settling. My steps were measured, heel to toe with a sound that fell away quickly, the wood underfoot giving a muted knock, but not loud enough to break anything. I paused with one hand on the doorframe, thumb brushing the cold paint, waiting half a second longer than needed before moving again. Behind me, the candlelight still pooled on the table, gold fading at the edges. The empty chair angled just so the cushion flattened but ready. Napkin folded but loose. The glass sat where I'd left it, liquid shining unbroken at the top. No ring on the table beneath it, just a dull shine of polish reflecting the hanging bulbs. Voices carried in low ripples, soft claps, a laugh that stayed the same volume, no matter how far the door eased shut behind me. She was leaning in to straighten the napkin fold, thumb pressing along the edge until it lay flat. The same slow drag I'd done once without thinking, candlelight bending over her wrist, catching the small motion that everyone seemed to watch without watching. Laughter drifting up warm, the sound of her name spilling soft, and even someone saying it again, clearer. A glass lifted in salute. My eyes caught the shine on the silver as she set it down just so, adjusting the flowers in the center, petals shifting to face the room, stem bending obedient under her touch, voices dropping for a second like they were waiting, then rising easy, spilling over plates, forks pressing down edges of food with a hush. A hand patted her shoulder lightly, thank you tucked between teeth. One slip of the tongue saying, thanks for Elise. Sorry, Jenna, with a small laugh, eyes darting past me before settling back on her. I watched through the side of the glass hutch, the reflection sharpening on her shape, filling the frame, mine split by the wood seam, fading at the edges, my face blurred where the gloss lost its polish. She moved again to lift a pitcher, offering quietly, the tilt of her head familiar, but not mine, not now. The sound of her voice low enough that people bent in, nodding, sharing that space I couldn't hear. My fingers settled around my glass, thumbs circling the rim, wet from untouched wine, pressing, then releasing. My chair creaked when I shifted back, 1 inch, then another, my knees catching on the table leg before I angled them away, the light following her movements, but leaving the corners pale, shadows gathering where I sat. I set the glass down without sound, palm resting on the tablecloth just long enough to feel the give, then sliding off slow. I let my gaze drift to the picture frames along the far wall, the camera turning for another shot, faces leaning in toward her, my shoulder a sliver at the edge, lost in the blur. Through the hutch glass again, I watched the light pool around her, saw the line of my own arm stretched pale beside the plates, the candle wicking low, the flame tremoring before holding steady, one thought sparking quiet. Back when and nothing more. A server moved slow along the edge of the table, the tray balanced steady, eyes pausing on me just a breath longer than needed. No words, no tilt of apology, only the glass lowered careful before me. The base set without a scrape, fingers drawing back soft like leaving space. A nod not full but present, light from the overhead bulb catching on their hair, making a halo that disappeared when they turned. My fingers shifted on the cloth napkin, thumb worrying the seam until it pressed flat, my eyes lifting to catch the blur of them, stepping around chairs, pausing to tuck one in with a foot, realigning it straight, the shadow of the backrest, laying clean along the floor. My own chair askew beside it, legs at an angle I didn't bother to fix. The hush that lived between plates stayed unbroken. Forks rested, no one filling the air where their step had been. Voices in the next room carried, a laugh pitched sharp then dulled as it struck the walls. A name called out, Elise? Elise. Drawn too long, turning over once like checking if it fit before dropping. No answer given or asked for. I heard it fade, replaced by the clink of a glass knocked too hard, a chuckle smoothed over quickly, the hush shifting like fabric catching air. When the server passed again, they glanced back, their face still but eyes meeting mine. Not searching, not averting. Something quiet held there before moving on. The sway of their apron catching the corner of a chair, cloth pulling, releasing without sound. I felt my hand hover over my own glass, fingers brushing the stem but not closing, the rim holding the light in a thin ring. My breath slowed as I let it out, shoulders dropping just enough to notice, eyes falling to where the napkin had bunched, corners askew, my thumb pressing it smooth, crease to crease, lines meeting careful but not perfect. The server's shadow passed over my place again, softer this time, leaving the light behind them to settle low, gathering under my eyes before slipping away. The room settling around the small space I took. No one reaching, no one asking. Just the cloth warm from my hand. He stood close enough that I could see the fold in his cuff, the slight tug where the seam stretched over his wrist, eyes meeting mine for half a second, pausing like they might hold, then sliding past, no nod, no call, the light catching one side of his face, warm and clear, the other lost in the shadow that pooled between us. A laugh rippling from the other side of the room, thin and too sharp, landing sonder between us. I felt the edge of my breath catch, a small push in my chest that didn't make it out. Eyes tracing the line of his shoulder as he angled away, fingers drumming once along the rim of his glass before lifting, his smile wide but aimed elsewhere, the light behind him throwing our shapes long on the wall, mine frayed at the edges, flickering when someone passed between. Once, the clink of a spoon against porcelain tapped twice, then silenced. The sound settling into the hush that followed, broken only by the quiet hush of fabric shifting over chairs. A flash of something caught in the reflection of a window pane behind him. The memory of a nod, once meant to end a talk before it began. Arms folding tight across a chest, eyes darting away. A spoon dropped slow to the plate with a sound too soft to matter. The overhead bulb spilling light across the back of his neck, casting me in the spill that didn't reach. My fingers tightened on the edge of the chair, pushing against the grain, thumb pressing a dent into the cushion before letting go. I let my eyes lower, watched the movement of his hand around the glass, the turn of his wrist, the knuckles pale with grip before relaxing, mine resting open on the tablecloth, lines of the fabric pressing into my palm, breath easing out slow enough to feel it tremble. My mouth closed on nothing, lips pulling together without sound, shoulders settling without command, the floor beneath my feet steady but too cool, a space marked only by absence. One last glance where he had been, the space filled now with soft light. The chair beside mine, angled perfect and empty, the warm bulb overhead humming a steady glow, bright enough to hold the center, but leaving the edges dim, the air between the seats unbroken, waiting. Nothing there to catch it. I stepped in slow, the light spilling across the long table, where the cloth had that slight fray I used to tuck under with my thumb. The corners still curling, but no one smoothed it now. Chairs arranged just so, the head of the table pushed an inch further back, leaving room for someone else to sit straight, comfortable. The glass at that spot, catching the glow of the chandelier, rim unchipped. I watched them ease in without pause, fingers wrapping the armrest I'd once rested elbows on, back pressed square and certain, voice rising in greeting that fell easily into the talk around them. A laugh spreading warm, pulling others closer, hands clapping once then settling, the name spoken twice, firm, no slip, no pause. The sound making room for itself like it had always lived there. Silverware quiet. No one turned. No head angled my way. My name not asked, not mispronounced, just not shaped at all. The space I'd filled smooth flat, without seam, their plates full, the pitcher passed down, without hesitation, napkins folded with crisp corners that stayed in place, nothing for me to straighten or fix. The arrangement perfect because I wasn't part of it. No inheritance of habit or tone, nothing left to remind, even the frame unfurled. My palm grazed the table edge, slow, skin brushing grain, fingers curling then loosening, leaving no mark, eyes landing off to the side where the candle guttered, flame bowing low, then standing again. The heat caught between us, but not crossing. Shadows bending behind chairs that weren't mine. My breath drew in short, chest tightening once before easing out, eyes dropping to the seam in the floorboards that split the light, following it until it thinned into the dark at the wall. I shifted my weight back, heel pressing the rug down. A hush of fabric slipping against wood as I stood clearer of the light, hand brushing at nothing on my coat front before letting it fall, shoulders lowering without notice. No call, no invitation, the glow staying where it was, holding them in a circle I couldn't enter. The chair at the head now angled perfect for someone else, cushion shaped by a body that fit the lamp overhead. The chair felt steady beneath me, wood cool through fabric, my spine rising a fraction when the mic cracked once, then settled into its echo, voice drawing the room quiet, words measured, each syllable finding space in the hush, naming details that hung exact, organizing, smoothing the small courtesies that made the night work, every line falling familiar, carved into memory, except the name that followed wasn't mine, spoken Clara. My eyes lifted slow, blinked once at the shape in the spotlight, seeing them lean into the praise with a nod, the smile rehearsed but easy, light catching along the ridge of their cheekbone, the sound of applause building in waves, palms hitting palms in unison, thick as rain on a tin roof. No stutter, no gap for correction, their name called again, louder, sealing it in place. I heard my own breath drag in and pause, chest held still, watching the room sway in time to the clapping, the reflection of movement skimming off silverware and wine. Someone across the table turned, eyes meeting mine a second longer than they meant to, lids flickering once. A small catch at the corner of their mouth that didn't become words, the look almost leaning forward before pulling back, neck bowing just slightly as their hands met in slow, deliberate rhythm, joining the applause without conviction, shoulders angling away, gaze dropping to the floor like they'd remembered something urgent and private. My fingers pressed into the edge of the napkin, feeling the seam shift under my nail, slow circles that flattened fabric without straightening it. The glass by my hand untouched, condensation catching the light in narrow lines that slipped across the table. I let my lips close over nothing, teeth resting without bite, the soft pull of air through my nose the only sound I made, eyes falling to the place where the fold in the cloth refused to stay even. The applause didn't break, it ebbed only enough to fill the spaces between chairs, spotlight holding on the one who'd stood to receive, faces turning open to them, light pouring over shoulders, glinting in glass rims, leaving the edge of the room dim, the chair under me pressed back a half-inch into that cool, steady shadow, the candle at my end burning lower flame, stretching thin, light enough only to catch the wet line along the glass. I stood slowly, the scrape of chair legs hushed by the thick rug, no one looking up, the sound swallowed in laughter that spilled from the table. Glasses raised, forks resting easy. My fingers brushed the edge of the cloth once, thumb catching on a loose thread before letting it slide free. The door eased open without resistance, hinges quiet, cool air drifting in, brushing my neck where hair had come loose, the collar of my coat shifting, light from inside spilling past me in a long line onto the floor. I stepped onto the narrow porch, boards creaking soft under my weight, breath rising visible for half a second before dissolving. The wind moved slow, just enough to turn the hem of my coat around my thigh. No urgency, no push to go faster. The lantern overhead casting a circle too small to warm. My shoulder relaxed without command, settling lower as the frame of the door cut the noise behind me to a dull, steady murmur. Voices thinned, punctuated by the soft ring of glass touching glass. I turned slightly, eyes finding the window. The pane clouded with breath from inside, figures moving clear behind it. Faces bent in conversation, heads tilted, hands gesturing, no one pausing at the space I'd left. The shape of me reflected dim in the glass, blurred along the edge of their brightness, a corner of my mouth half formed, the line of my cheek cutting off where a light failed to. The laughter stayed even, rolling like something mechanical, practiced, meant for them. My hand rested on the railing, palm flat, fingers curling once before easing away, wood cool, worn smooth where hands had passed before mine. I let the coat fall straight along my sides, fabric settling without sound, breath leaving my chest in one long stream that didn't hitch, eyes dropping to where the floorboards met, the seeing darken the glow that reached just so far. My other hand lifted to the collar, adjusted it slow, thumb tracing the inside hem before falling slack again. I watched the light shift inside as someone leaned forward, the circle closing tighter without me, faces catching more glow, leaving this side of the glass to dim, my own shape thinning in reflection, the line of my shoulder moving just enough to lose form. I didn't press forward, didn't knock, didn't ask, just stood, watching, until my eyes lost focus, lids lowering slow, breath steady, the last bit of warmth fading from my fingers as they left the railing and fell to my side. He moved closer without warning, weaving through chairs left askew, the noise of the room dulled behind his steps, eyes careful on the floor until they lifted just enough to meet mine once, not searching, only stopping there a moment. He didn't clear his throat, didn't call for attention. Just let his voice drift low, like it belonged somewhere older. "That's what you used to tell me," he said, soft enough that it fell between us like something shared without asking. Words bent around the air, not demanding, not praising. His fingers adjusted the edge of a tray against his hip, thumb tapping once before he looked down, weight shifting back. The light above him swung a fraction, sending a thin band across my cheek before moving on, fading off his shoulder in uneven strokes. My breath snagged halfway, lips parting without sound, head angling just enough to see him clearer, then stopping. Eyes blinked slow, the line of his jaw sharpening under the lantern glow, mouth set in the way of someone who didn't need an answer. I held there, caught, trying to place the shape of the words, letting them settle where noise didn't reach. My fingers hovering over the napkin twitched once, brushing fabric without folding it, the edge slipping loose again as I didn't fix it. He didn't stay, turning in silence, steps measured, tray balanced, moving back through the room that never quieted. The laughter behind him blurred, voices stretching vowels too long, no one else noticing the shape left behind where he'd paused. I watched the gap close around him, the line of his back taking the last of the direct light, leaving only the spill of its echo on my arm pale against the sleeve. My eyes lowered, breath let out slow, one hand flattening on the table, thumb pressing into the wood grain, tension catching there before easing, fingers curling soft, then closing tight enough to leave half moons in skin, releasing in a hush. Light from the window caught the glass by my side, throwing a thin flare up into my face, reflecting back just enough to show my eyes open, clear now, watching without blinking, the noise fading to something manageable. A waiter passed too close, the tray shifting, something slipping off with a muted thud against carpet. No clang, but enough for heads to turn. The small black wallet splayed open near my chair, the edge of a government seal catching light, embossed and stark. Letters clean, even in dim glow. His eyes darted down too late, mouth opening without a word, throat moving once in a swallow that sounded loud in the hush that fell. Someone near me shifted their fork just off the plate, the scrape catching like a cough that didn't clear, a hand half raised to help but stopping midair. He bent to pick it up slow, fingers careful, pinching the corner like it might burn. Eyes lifting once to mine as he straightened, the word forming soft, not question, but apology, landing flat between us. "Ma'am," he breathed, voice cracking in the middle before dying. Everything else stilled. The micro squeal cut mid-laugh at another table, a single glass chime half finished, voices falling out of cadence like dancers who missed the cue. Even the ambient clatter dulled, replaced by the rustle of clothes as people turned. Eyes found me from the corners of conversation, skimming first, then landing direct. The weight of looking shifting heavy, not wide-eyed, not gasping, just slower, measuring. The space between us pulling tight without touch. I didn't move, hand hovering above the table's edge. Fingers loose, palm open like waiting for the shape of something it forgot to hold. My gaze followed the waiter stepping back. Shoulders hunched in apology, he didn't speak. Tray tight against his chest now, eyes lowered. Around us, the lights didn't brighten or fade, but their color flattened, shadows staying where they were, but sharper, edges defined. I exhaled slow, letting it leave steady, chin lifting just enough to catch their eyes in return. No nod, no drop, just still. The fingers resting on the napkin tensed once before laying flat, smoothing it with the heel of my hand, glass untouched beside me. The clinking picked up again but thinner, no laughter filling it, words chosen more carefully, too evenly spaced. No one spoke my name, but they didn't look away. I let my shoulders settle, caged breath freeing one quiet measure. Eyes staying open, not hard, not soft. The candlelight caught in the rim of my glass, splitting in two, laying lines of light along the table that didn't cross. I watched it flicker once, then hold, the flame bending only slightly, as if it knew better than to go out. I pushed the chair back slow, the legs rubbing quiet against the floor. No scrape to break the hush that had fallen. No one stopped me. Heads turned but lowered just as quickly, eyes meeting mine for a breath before darting off. Some fixed on the tablecloth folds, some watching their own fingers. The laughter that had filled the space an hour ago sounded thin at the edges, drifting into corners where it died soft. I let my hand rest on the table one last time, palm flat, fingers spreading just enough to feel the grain beneath them. The napkin lay to the side, creased from where I'd held it too long. I picked it up between two fingers, smoothing it once along the seam, then folded it deliberate even, leaving the edge straight before setting it down careful, the cloth sighing back into place. Someone coughed, short, clipped, the sound swallowed before it could echo. No one spoke. If they looked from the side, glances bouncing off me without landing. One pair of eyes caught mine and didn't hold, sliding away like water over glass, mouth pressing thin. A chair scraped behind me but didn't rise, the figure there shifting only to lean away, giving me space without offering it. Even the server who'd knocked over the tray before turned slow at the noise, gaze cautious, hand flattening against the tray's rim without lifting it. My fingers left the napkin, brushing once along the edge of my wine glass, leaving a dull print on the clear surface before pulling back. The glass stayed untouched, heavy with liquid that caught the low chandelier light, scattering it in pale arcs over the table. I didn't lift it. My hand fell to my side, thumb tucked in against my palm, the line of my wrist straight. I walked, without hurry. A voice started behind me. "Thin, miss." But it fell off, leaving the air heavy. I didn't turn. No explanation, no excuse. Just the hush of fabric against fabric. The soft knock of heel against wood, moving past the edge of light where the chandelier failed to reach. The curtain at the far door stirred with the movement, air sneaking in and curling around my ankles. I paused at the threshold, let one breath out slow, felt it cool as it left. Eyes flicking once over the room. Chairs angled, some empty, some half turned away, people blinking, mouths closed. The napkin on my plate stayed folded, white and even, the glass full. I didn't need to tell them anything. The room said enough.